Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of The Daily Prompt. If you've been watching along, following along this journey from the beginning of this journey, over the past week or so, we have reverse engineered the process itself. I've done sort of an overview dive into each of the 7 phases, started looking at how we tie that together, helped you understand how we learn, why it's important to give this as much time as you need to. Yesterday, I went maybe a little crazy and committed. I'm going to see this through to the end, and I hope that you will too. One of the exciting things I think about this series, really, is that this is the journey. I'm starting from nothing. I mean, not nothing, but I'm taking it back to starting from nothing so that you can see how we build an independent film studio from effectively nothing. So if you're along for the ride, if you've just sort of joined us after, not knowing that we existed for a while, if there's already, dozens or hundreds of episodes and you're sort of back here going, I'll never catch up, don't worry. It's really about the journey. It's really about understanding the road and the ride. There's a very meta level to all this. If you're watching this far enough into the future, meta is probably not a thing anymore. Probably isn't a thing today. But anyway, there's a certain you're watching the package being made as you're consuming the package. So there's a sort of if you can see what's happening here, I think it's kind of a unique thing. One of the things that you might not have noticed if you've been watching from the beginning, obviously if you're watching in the future, you'll already know all this, but if you're watching as we go in real time, you may not realize that we reverse engineered the process of screenwriting, or we've sort of looked at how you go about reverse engineering it. But there's something missing. There's a missing element to what I've presented. And to be perfectly honest with you, that element has been missing since all along. Ultimately, this is the missing element, I believe, in the entire screenwriting realm, in the entire, sorry, my chair got, in the entirety of the screenwriting arena. One of the great challenges that we have is there's a giant missing element. Every screenwriting class, every screenwriting course, every screenwriting book, every screenwriting seminar or webinar or consultation or feedback session, or all of it is missing this one really rather important and essential element, and that is production. At the end of the day, if you want to be a screenwriter specifically, and I know we have some novelists and we have people writing other things and just creative people in general watching this, but if your goal is to write screenplays, I want to speak to that at this moment, you have to understand how not just to write, how not just to write well, how not just to go through that process and get the notes and feedback and understand how to use and decipher and align to notes and feedback and find and connect with you need to know all that stuff. But in addition to that, you need to understand how to write for production. And I think it's crazy. I understand it, but I think it's crazy that there really isn't any way to learn how to write for production. I mean, it's possibly part of what film school can be about, where you're learning all the different aspects, but if you're specifically focused on screenwriting, and it's really about writing at a professional level, turning your ideas, your unique passions into something truly original, but doing it in a way that a producer or production company could say yes to it, then the one missing ingredient from all the screenwriting specific stuff anyway is the production element. If you're writing material that can't ultimately get produced, it doesn't matter how good your story is. It doesn't matter how good your screenplay is. It doesn't matter how effectively you present those ideas onto the page if they're not ultimately viable to a producer, to a production company, to the production process. If you as a writer are not skilled enough to adapt and align your material to the real world needs of production, we run into a pretty major problem. So in addition to these 7 phases, ultimately, what's missing is the production aspect of it. Now, the reason this is missing, and one of the reasons this is such a challenge to help writers understand, is because if you're actually going to produce a film, if you're actually going to make something, there are enormous resources involved in that, whether it's just the time of a low or no budget crew, or whether it's tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of a big budget project. No, you don't just go out and invest and use up those kinds of resources to teach someone how to write for that medium. But ultimately, that's the reality of what screenwriters need. Screenwriters need to have that skill. They need to have that knowledge. If we look back at this process, at the 7 phases of this process, it's not enough to know what producers need. It's not enough to pre-align your imagination with the end target if it's all theoretical, if it's all hypothetical. If you do some research and you find out this is the kind of thing that horror film producers need at this point in time, and you don't actually interact with or talk to or know the real world immediate needs of modern day horror film producers, well, then you're kind of going in circles. It might make you feel good that you're doing this research or that you're getting a handle on this stuff, but ultimately you may be missing the mark entirely. So when you go about developing your project, everything that you develop, that whole process you go through, you may be missing the mark. You may be way off base, and then you're not pre-aligned with your target, and then you're putting all this energy into something that may ultimately not land with its target. Does that make sense? So, how do you get that? How do you know that? Well, you have to have the hands-on experience. This is why, there's this whole adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know, and this whole sort of, one of the reasons writers get very deflated in the film industry specifically, or trying to make a screenwriting career happen, is because they don't have any contacts, and so they feel like they're so far away from it. And if you don't have any contacts, well, how are you supposed to get in and make those connections when ultimately, here's the reality. If I have good friends who I know are skilled at what they do, yeah, I'm going to keep going back to them and making movies with them. Why would I go try to hunt out new people that I don't know, whose skills are not tested, that I'm not very familiar with? So of course, people who are connected, whether it's through nepotism or whether it's just through friendships or whether it's through past projects, of course people are going to work with people that they know and they love and they trust. You have to take that idea and put it out of your head, because that's going to happen. So your objective is to get to the point where you're in that position, to get to the point where you know what to do, how to do it, who to connect with. You've built your own network, your tribe, whatever it might be, right? So when it comes to production specifically, you need to have that knowledge and those skills in order to pre-align your imagination with that ultimate target. Does that make sense? So let me see if I can put this more succinctly. So if you have never had anything that you've written actually produced, the problem is all of the writing that you're doing, all of the creativity that you're putting into it is theoretical, is hypothetical. It's based on your imagination and the ideas and the vision that you might have, and you can get that really sharp and really clear. The problem is that may be off base, that may be off target with what the actual needs of production or a producer or production company actually are. So how do we get that? We have to actually write for production to be able to have that knowledge and those skills to be able to then infuse that into our creative process. So I'm hoping that this is clear. Let me know in the comments if you have questions or you're unsure about this sort of a thing. Because, look, the reality is if you're trying to actually write something that your target can use, you have to know and understand and intuitively create something that they can actually use. That doesn't mean writing for them. That doesn't mean selling out or taking your idea and putting it on the back burner in favor of what they need. It means bringing what you have, your unique vision, your unique perspective, to the process in a way they can use. Now, if you don't have that production experience, you simply do not have the ability to infuse that into your creative process. So the whole point of what I'm saying is that you have to develop that. That is a skill as much as rewriting is a skill, as much as polishing is a skill, as much as writing punchy dialogue is a skill, as much as structuring your story in the most effective way to convey your idea is a skill. All of these things are skills. There are literally hundreds of skills wrapped up in these 7 phases. The one that nobody talks about, the missing element, is the skill of writing for production. And the big challenge that you have is that there is no way to actually develop that skill without taking your projects and putting them through the production process. So, how do we learn that process? That's the whole point of what I'm trying to build here with the writer's room. Is it's not just enough to go through that writing process. Yes, you can get really good at capturing your ideas and growing them into stories and creating stories that most effectively serve those ideas. Yes, you can get good at creating amazing, extraordinary first drafts. Yes, you can get good at the rewrite process and going through at those 6 levels and getting really solid and really intuitive with taking that idea, taking that draft that you've got and turning it into exactly what you wanted to say. Yes, you can get good at polishing and getting notes and feedback and even finding and connecting with producers or production companies. But the one thing that you can't get good at without actual experience is the reality of writing for production. And the reality of writing for production is unique. It's different. Let's say you write an extraordinary scene that we can't use. What if an actor is unable to hit the emotion of the dialogue or the subtext or whatever beautiful thing you've written? In reality, on the day of the shoot, the actor cannot bring it. What do? We need the writer to come up with some alternative, or more likely what's going to happen, because the writer's not going to be on set because they don't know how to handle themselves on a set. Instead, the actor's going to improvise something, or the director's going to say, hey, let's do it this way instead, and they're going to change that thing you meticulously refined. If you understand the realities of writing for production, then you become of value to the production. You become someone that when you're on the set and that's unable to happen and you can see that it's unable to happen, you can tap into your creative wisdom. You can tap into all these skills, the rewrite process and the refinement process, and your understanding of symbols and metaphor and story and story world and all the hundreds of things that are woven throughout this thing. You can tap into all of them and instantly, instinctively, spontaneously come up with a solution that satisfies the reality of the production needs. It's not just about budget. It's not just about marketing. It's not just about not being able to shoot the sunset scene because it's raining that day. Sometimes it's about the nuance of the thing. Sometimes we go and we try to shoot a scene and what looked really good on paper just doesn't play right. It just doesn't look right. So what do? We have to go back and refine and rewrite. Understanding those kinds of things, understanding legitimately writing for production is it's a real world tangible skill. It's the reason experienced screenwriters are going to be called first rather than new screenwriters who haven't proven themselves, because the experienced screenwriters will understand, whether explicitly or intuitively, they'll understand these kinds of unique nuances and details. So, how do we go about fixing this? There's really only there's 2 ways. One I'm going to talk about today, one I'm going to talk about in tomorrow's episode. The first primary way, what I'm suggesting is that we basically create a sort of learning studio. My goal has always been to build an independent film studio. The penny dropped for me about, I don't know, a year ago, something like that. And then I sort of figured out that this vlog may be the best way to promote the idea, which is that once you go through and you develop these skills and we know and we can prove and we can demonstrate that you have these skills, what if we then go and we make projects? What if we then go and we actually put your work into production? And what if we actually make those so that you can see how that plays out? You can see what works, what doesn't, and you can take that knowledge and that insight and, most importantly, weave that into your creative process. This is the part that I'm not sure is going to come across to everyone. This is the part that I'm a little worried is not going to stick with you. But it's the part that I need you to understand. It's not just about making your movie. It's not, as the screenwriter, it's not just about your story. Your story is our guiding document. It's what we're here to do. But it's not about your screenplay. It's about the movie. The screenplay is to help us make the movie. That's a very different thing than it being about your screenplay, than it being about the ideas you have and the vision you have. It's not just that. It's the vision we all share. It's the vision that our collective creativity brings to the final movie. The director, the actors, the writer, the producer, the camera guy, the lighting person, everyone along the way. We're a team. I always say that screenwriters are the first person on a new team project. So the team project is making the movie. You're the first person on this movie that currently only exists in your head. But guess what? It's not just that thing that exists in your head. You can't be an auteur here. You can't be precious about it has to be my way, it has to be this. Because at the end of the day, there are production realities. We're making a movie, not a reading document, not a novel, right? So to understand writing for production, to understand this missing element, the fact that you need to learn what the production process brings to your creativity, what it limits, how it limits and focuses your creativity. How do we go about doing that? My solution is to create this writer's room where once we've been through this once writers go through this entire process and they've developed literally hundreds of skills and they can demonstrate that they have, we're ready to go into the writer's room where there's 8 to 10 writers who are each going to write a different project. They're each going to contribute to everybody else's project. And then we're going to, at the end of the season, we're going to make at least one of them and up to all of them. That's my way to go about trying to build this independent film studio. I'm going to talk about an alternative way tomorrow. But ultimately, that's what this is about. So it's about helping writers understand writing for the production process by creating an environment in which we can do that and learn how to do that. So that at the end, you are able to take those writers there and anyone watching as we go through this process, we're able to take those ideas and those insights and incorporate them into this stuff that we've just reverse engineered into this process so that when you pre-align your imagination, it's including knowledge and skills about the production process. When you find an idea or organically grow it into a story, you're doing that with the production process in mind. When you're blasting out that first draft, you've got the production process in the back of your head. It's literally as much as part of your creativity as the idea of theme or the idea of building a strong character or of creating unique fragmented subplots that tie together at the end. Those are story elements. The production process is part of the screenwriter's process. Makes sense? So we're not fully reverse engineering the process until we include the creative aspect of the production part of the process. Does that make sense? Otherwise, we're not talking about screenwriting. We're talking about writing a piece of paper, which is all well and good, but this isn't about writing a piece of paper. This is about writing something that we can turn into a movie. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm trying to build with this series and what I'm going to take you on the journey of as we go through and as we build this. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a bit of time. It's going to take a bit of effort and energy to get there. We're going to stumble and we're going to fall along the way. But through stumbling and falling, you'll be able to see, oh, this is why we stumbled and fell. This is why we stumbled and fell. this is how we can overcome those things on the next project. And we build and we grow, and hopefully we take the understanding of writing for production and we infuse it into the creative process. Hopefully I'm not sort of hitting this one over the head with a hammer too much, but I really do want to make sure that you understand this is the missing element. This is the reason this is one of the reasons that writers who are either intermediate or pro level are not connecting. It's because that is not infused into their creative process. It doesn't just have to do with production. It has to do with the entire picture. It has to do with the entire marketing and distribution and characters and how producers go about putting a project together. All that stuff. Understanding, knowing, intuitively having that as part of your experience and your DNA, and then infusing that into your creative process is what's going to make all the difference in the world. It is what's going to fill out the entire process. And so that's why I'm trying to build it. And so that's where we're trying to go with all this. So again, if you have any questions, I think this is clear. Sometimes I finish these and I'm not quite sure. So if you have questions, pop them in the comments box below, please. If you like this video, like it, subscribe to us, click the bell, all that stuff. But for today's daily prompt, here's what I want you to do and what I want you to think about. I want you to think about whatever idea you have or whatever idea you're working on or whatever's going on at the moment. I want you to think about that idea, and I want you to imagine the production part of the end film. So if you've got an idea for a movie, a horror film, a comedy, whatever it might be, imagine the production part of the process. If you're an old pro, you're going to imagine all that in a lot more detail. If you're brand new, you really know nothing about it, take whatever behind the scenes footage you have in your memory and just go there in your imagination. It doesn't matter how accurate you are. What matters is thinking through the production process part of it. And what I want you to do is imagine actually making the film of your movie idea. Now, think about the logistics of just what you know so far about your project. If it's a stray idea, just what you think it's easy, you think it's challenging, is it something that could logistically be done, something not? Think about, just ponder that for a moment. And then imagine incorporating what you think about the production of your project, incorporating those thoughts, incorporating those ideas into your creative process. How is it going to change what you're imagining? How is it going to change the journey you take or the path you take? How is it going to change your moving through these 7 phases to get where it is you're trying to go? If you can take that on board, if you can understand if anything's confusing, pop them in the questions below, in the comments below. But ultimately, if you can do that, if you can start to see the production logistics of whatever project you're thinking right now. And by the way, this should not in any way limit your creativity. It's not about going, wow, that's too expensive, let's write something else instead. It's not about expensive. It's not about difficult or challenging. It's about understanding what that is, putting it in the back of your creative subconscious so that it can inform your creativity, not so that it controls your conscious focus choices. If you've been following all along and you know what I'm talking about with your conscious focus and how the vast majority of it happens in your creative subconscious, we want this knowledge and this information, the production aspect of it, to be in the creative subconscious, not to be in the conscious focus, because then you're going to make creative decisions that are going to derail the magic of your story. What you want it to be is in the background so that as you create, you're intuitively creating something that is more viable to be produced and more viable to actually get made, because it's created from that vantage point. It's like you're creating a screenplay rather than just creating a story or a novel. You understand? If you're thinking like a novelist writing your screenplay, you're not writing a screenplay. If you're thinking like a screenwriter while you're writing your novel, you're not creating the most effective novel. What you need to do is think like a screenwriter, production and all, as you're creating your screenplay, and then those ideas that you have are going to more instinctively be in sync with your ultimate target outcome. So again, any questions, let me know. But that's today's daily prompt. Thank you for watching. What we're going to do tomorrow is I'm going to show you a little, I'm going to fill this out a little bit more, and I'm going to show you possibly an alternative. We're going to go a step deeper, and it should be fun for a Saturday. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to actually take action and do this stuff. Don't just think about it. Take action. We'll see you tomorrow.